So you've decided it's time for a new garden gate. How do you go about measuring up for it, especially if one or both of the posts aren't quite vertical? Whether you're fitting them yourself or having someone do it for you, if you're planning to supply the gate, you'll need to provide both the height and width to your chosen supplier. I've been fitting a couple of new made-to-measure garden gates at Handyman Towers recently, having purchased them from Premier Garden Supplies. You can find them on eBay. What they suggest is that you measure the total gap from post to post and allow for a small gap of around 10mm at either side. So, for example, if your post-to-post gap is 1168mm, then your gate width would need to be 1148mm. But what if, like this one, the concrete post leans in at the top, such that the post-to-post gap at the top is 15mm less than at the bottom? Ignore the fact that's not what it looks like in the picture. That's just because I can't take a good photo. How do you allow for that? Or indeed, if the post leans out, such that the gap at the top is wider than the bottom? Well, often you'll see the recommendation that you should take 3 measurements, one near the top, one at the middle and one near the bottom, and then take the smallest measurement of the 3, subtract your 10mm gap at either side and use that for the gate width. But while that should ensure your gate isn't too wide for your gap, you may find that you end up with quite large gaps between the gate and the posts in places. In this example, if we use the smallest post-to-post measurement of 1160mm, giving a gate width of 1140mm, then we're actually going to end up with a gap of 17.5mm either side at the bottom of the gate. Now that's not the end of the world, and you could certainly live with it, or cover it up with some trim pieces, but I like to aim for a better fit. So, rather than using the smallest post-to-post measurement, I typically take an average of all 3 measurements and use that figure instead. I've shown the calculations for this example, but no need to get pen and paper out and worry about your math skills. Just use the calculator app on your phone, add the 3 measurements together and then divide by 3, and you're done. You'll probably find the answer comes out with some figures after the decimal point. Ignore those and just round the number down, which in this case gives 1167mm. With a resulting gate width of 1147mm, we've reduced the gap either side of the gate somewhat, which should result in a better visual appearance. At which point everyone is already commenting that we could have just used the very initial middle measurement of 1168mm, giving a gate width of 1148mm, and achieved pretty much the same result. Or just taken the smallest gate width of 1140 and added a few millimetres on either side, just reducing the gap. And whilst that's true to some extent, I'd argue that using the average is a more considered approach. It's certainly worked for me on multiple occasions. One slight note of caution though is that wood, being a natural product, will tend to swell in size when it gets really wet, and conversely shrink when it dries out. So I would normally never leave a gap of less than 5mm either side, as there's a risk of the gate binding on one or more gate posts after an extended period of rainy weather. Anyway, that's my method, and if it's not for you, you can always fit some trim pieces that hide the gap completely. Thanks for watching, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on seeing how I went about hanging this gate. Cheers!